Solitary confinement doesn't work. It harms people. It creates a longer life of pain.
Tonight, a new bill passed by the Senate wants to restrict solitary confinement in Canada.
We intend to hire 20 per class. There's 4 classes a year, so that's 80 a year.
After decades of calls for more police resources in First Nations, a police force in Ontario is finally getting the help it needs.
And then Janessa, the champion child, raising money for other kids who have to go to the Children's Hospital.
And a number of Indigenous youth have been recognized with a coronation medal for their work in the community. Tanse, good evening. I'm Krisanach Kate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. On Tuesday night, the Senate passed a bill that would restrict solitary confinement in federal prisons. The federal government has committed to limiting the practice in the past, but this time, Senator Kim Pate, the bill's co-sponsor, hopes the House of Commons will pass it into legislation, and solitary confinement will be phased out once and for all. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
The bill is called S-230, or Tona's Law, after Tona Mills. And Senator Kim Pate had this to say about her at a press conference in Ottawa on Wednesday morning.
The horrific reality is this is an Indigenous woman who went through 10 years of isolation and then had to be in the mental health system for another almost 11 years and has been free and clear of the system for just less than 1 year and then diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so she said that she hopes before she dies she sees a law that would prohibit what happened to her.
The proposed legislation would require prison authorities to seek court approval to isolate an inmate longer than 48 hours, allow prisoners to seek reduced sentences or greater parole eligibility where segregation made their sentence harsher, and prohibit isolation for inmates dealing with mental health issues. According to statistics accompanying the bill, Indigenous people make up 44% of those in segregation, and Indigenous women 96% of females in segregation. Pate says her bill would build upon regulations in 1992's Corrections and Conditional Release Act.
At that time, it was a piece of human rights legislation aimed in particular at helping ensure that people who should not be in prison weren't there. Section 29 says people with mental health issues and health issues should be in health settings. This bill, Bill S-230, helps push that along.
The NDP's Blake Desjardins is the legislation's other co-sponsor. He says he is hoping for cross-party support so the bill can pass through the House as quickly as possible.
Solitary confinement doesn't work. It harms people. It creates a longer life of pain. We need to see a kind of future where our justice system is restoring people, is helping them reintegrate into community.
There is no date yet set when Bill S-230 will be introduced in the House of Commons. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
To speak more on Tona's Law, we're joined again by Senator Kim Pate, who speaks to us from Ottawa. Senator Kim Pate, thanks for taking some time for us. We heard a little in Fraser's story about Tona Mills, but can you tell us about her and how you came to know her?
Sure. Well, Tona is now 52. I met her when she was 19, just coming into the system before she was in the federal system. She's a 60 scoop survivor. She had been in child welfare. She's been in the youth system. She was in the adult system. And why we named Tona's Law after her is because she spent nearly, over 10 years in isolation in federal penitentiaries. As a result of that, she developed what was diagnosed by the psychiatrist in the mental health system in Nova Scotia as isolation-induced schizophrenia. And then it was about 11 years in that system before she was able to come out into the community. And when the Senate, I've been in touch with her over the years, saw her every few months. She knew my children. My kids are now grown up. When we were doing the human rights study on the human rights of federally sentenced persons, we visited her in the psychiatric unit in the hospital where she was. And one of the things she said to me and the other 3 senators from our Human Rights Committee who were there was, she talked about what had happened to her, the horrific treatment she received at the hands of corrections, at the hands of even psychologists in the prison system, and asked us to please, if we could, pass a law. Well, we asked what we could do, and she said, please pass a law to stop this from ever happening to someone again. Well, around the same time, the government was deciding, as a result of some court cases challenging the use of segregation and solitary confinement, they brought in a new law in 2019, Bill C-83 it was called. It basically just renamed segregation, though, and took away some of the limited oversight, legal oversight that existed. And so with the late Senator Foray Singh, a Métis senator from here in Ontario, we worked on, well, a number of other senators as well, worked on amendments to that bill. And initially, even though the Senate voted on them and the government rejected a bunch of them, we voted to send it back. And basically the long and the short is, in the end, the government did not adopt a number of the amendments. But Senator Foray Singh and I and a number of other senators started going into the prisons to monitor what was happening. At the same time, the correctional investigator was monitoring, and the ministerial advisory committee that was set up was monitoring. We all came to the same conclusion. Basically, what the government said they were going to do was not being done. Money that they had been given to contract with beds in mental health resources in provinces and territories had not been contracted. Mental health advocates from outside the prison system hadn't been hired. And the very oversight mechanisms they put in place weren't being listened to. So the independent decision makers, their decisions weren't being followed. And so we worked on this legislation and decided to call it Tona's Law because of her request to us to end the use of segregation. And basically it passed the Senate last night. This morning, Member of Parliament, Métis senator from, Métis Member of Parliament from Edmonton, Griesbach, has taken it on, and hopefully it'll go through the House of Commons now. Tona, when I talked to her last night, she called me right after the vote. She was crying. She's dying. Actually, she, within a year, sadly, of being released from all of the systems, and for the first time in almost 3 decades being free in the community, she has now been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so she's been told she has 6 to 9 months. Well, in September, she was told she has 6 to 9 months to live. And her wish is that this becomes law, so that before she dies, she knows that she had some small part in trying to help prevent what happened to her from happening to others. The bill, in addition to putting in oversight mechanisms, in addition to trying to deter corrections from using solitary confinement in all kinds of variations, regardless of what they call it, also requires them to actually look at some of the mechanisms that would allow people with mental health issues, as well as Indigenous people, to be released into their communities with supports to be held accountable in their communities. And so that's something that really should have been done back in 1992 when the law was first passed, but has really been interfered with and subverted by the way the government implemented those. So there are a number of provisions. It also provides a remedy where the way that corrections treats people amounts to them breaking the law themselves.
Senator Pate, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for speaking with us on this.
Thank you very much, Creason, and thank you to APTN for all the incredible work you do, and happy holidays to everybody.
A First Nation police service in Northern Ontario has signed an agreement with the province to become an essential service. It's a signing organizers say will increase safety for its officers and improve infrastructure, and it comes after more than 30 years of calls to increase police resources in First Nations. The agreement was signed in Toronto on Tuesday. The Anishinaabe Police Service will now be the first ever First Nation police service to work under the umbrella of Ontario's Community Facing and Policing Act. Ontario also announced it will invest $514 million to help double the number of officers to more than 500. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says the agreement will allow the force to have the same standards as every other force across Ontario. The Anishinaabe Police Service works on 34 First Nations in Northern Ontario. Ontario's Solicitor General Michael Kersner announced yesterday that the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation will join the province's Community Safety and Policing Act.
The regulations that will support this this legislation will include the creation of standards, and that's something that's been just missing over the last 30 years, that our police service will need to adhere to certain standards like any other police service.
We intend to hire 20 per class. There's 4 classes a year, so that's 80 a year. So we hope to be staffed up. We lose 20 a year because of the remoteness and the challenges of the policing. So our hope is within 6 years we'll be staffed up.
What this opt-in does today is it sends a message that Ontario will do what it has to do when others won't and when others can't.
A mother from Pelican Narrows in northeastern Saskatchewan is speaking out, hoping that more can be done to keep her and her children warm this winter. This is the second family to speak with APTN News following a long-term and ongoing housing crisis in the community. Carol Ann Ballantyne is a mother of 5 children. She's been living in this camper trailer in Pelican Narrows for 3 years. Ice has been building up on the trailer walls, and Ballantyne says she has to constantly go to town and fill 2 100-pound propane tanks to keep her camper warm. She can't use a wood stove because her 2-year-old daughter has asthma, and her older daughter gets sick and misses school because of moisture and mold growing in her trailer. Ballantyne said if it wasn't for her mother buying a power box from Sask Power out of her own pocket, they wouldn't have any electricity at all. Ballantyne says she put her name on the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation's housing list, but the band says it has more than 3,900 band members and only 335 housing units. The Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation also says the ongoing violence and safety concerns in the community has made it harder to get homes shipped to them. Ballantyne says she would like her First Nation to help.
They haven't helped at all. I asked my welfare worker if he can open an account for me in order for me just to drive to Flin Flon anytime to pick up propane. But all he did is laugh at me and he said, open your own account. And I did try, but they said they couldn't open an account until my welfare worker was there to help, but he doesn't want to help me. Many times I cry at night, hugging my baby, hugging my kids, wishing I can give them a better life.
APTN News contacted the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation but have yet to hear back before broadcast time. In a previous statement to APTN News regarding a similar situation there, Vice Chief Justin Halcrow said people living in camper trailers in the wintertime is a reflection of the broader housing crisis in Pelican Narrows, with the community facing chronic overcrowding and limited infrastructure. The challenges of getting ready to move homes transported to the community is also compounded by current and ongoing safety concerns and the limited availability of contractors willing to work in the area. Those who do agree hire security efforts just to do the job safely. Jody Wilson-Raybould, Canada's first Indigenous woman ever elected into Parliament, joins us next to tell us about her latest work. That interview when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now to Vancouver, where our APTN's Tina House had a chance to sit down with Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was the first Indigenous woman ever elected into Parliament to become the Attorney General of Canada back in 2015 and was elected again as an independent in 2019. And now she is a best-selling author.
Thank you. We are incredibly honored to have the one and only Jody Wilson-Raybould here in our studio in North Vancouver. Jody, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
This is exciting. This is your 4th book, Reconciling History. Please tell us a little more about your latest book.
Yeah, I'm really excited. For this book, I worked with a very close friend and colleague of mine, Roshan Danesh. It's entitled Reconciling History, A Story of Canada. And what we sought to do was to tell an oral history of this country, told through the voices of the many, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, as opposed to the few, which I think many of us have heard history told by the few. And the book is structured around many different voices from various time periods in Canada's history, and the parts are framed around a totem pole that was raised in my grandmother's village that speaks to the legacy of colonialism, but also speaks to the history and the lineage and the traditions of my people, the Muskama Tawadena people.
Wow, incredible. Tell us what you've been up to besides writing books.
Oh, well, writing books has preoccupied a great amount of my time, but I have the great fortune of working with many people with Indigenous communities around governance and rebuilding nations. But I also have the opportunity to travel a lot throughout the country and speak to many diverse communities, to industry, to various government bodies, and in Indigenous communities, speaking about leadership, speaking about politics, and speaking about how we can all work to advance true reconciliation.
Amazing. Jody, I've known you for a number of years now. I've met you when you were not in politics, and then when you first got elected as regional chief here in BC, and then you moved forward to becoming the Attorney General of Canada. What have you learned from your experience in that high level of politics?
Oh gosh, yeah, it seems like a long time ago when we first met, and I had the great honor of being elected in 2009 as the regional chief for British Columbia, and through to being elected as an independent member of Parliament and serving as the Attorney General. What have I learned? I've learned that in order to create change, in order to advance reconciliation and advance the recognition of Indigenous people's rights or any other issue that's incredibly important in this period of time, is that you have to work incredibly hard. And in politics, I think the most important thing anybody can bring to politics, well, things I should say, is speaking the truth and acting with integrity. And for me, I think that's in short supply right now. And so when we see people that want to put their names forward and run for elected office, people that want to accomplish goals and advance agendas, including advancing the rights recognition agenda of Indigenous peoples, I gravitate to those people and want to support them.
Amazing. Would you read a passage for us out of your book?
Sure. Well, as I said, this is we seek to tell a story of Canada through the voices of Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, to be able to tell a shared story or a true story. And so there's many, many different voices. And after we finished writing, almost completing this book, I came across a quote by George Erasmus, whom you know, a former national chief and also a commissioner for the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. And it really encapsulates what we're seeking to do with this book. So George Erasmus says, "Where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. Where community is to be formed, common memory must be created." And so that's what we're seeking to do for people that pick up the book, is to read a little bit more into our history, into the different worldviews that make up this country now called Canada.
And tomorrow we will have part 2 of Tina House's Sit Down with Jody Wilson-Raybould. A number of Indigenous youth in Manitoba have been recognized for their work in the community. That story when we come back. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. And Amanda Myers shared this Christmas tree with us. Thanks, Amanda, and we hope you and yours have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, send us your pictures to share at aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, Charlottetown -2 in rain, Halifax 0. The Grand River -5, Kuujjuaq 0. Quebec City -7, Montreal -5. Windsor -6, London -7. Timmins -14, Sioux Lookout -22. -20 in Churchill, Thompson -22. Sun in Gimli and -20, Princess Harbour, partly cloudy and -19. Saskatoon -19, Regina -21. -25 in Stony Rapids, Buffalo Narrows -18. -6 in Grand Prairie, Peace River -6 there too. 0 in Red Deer, Medicine Hat -9. Tofino 9, Penticton 1. Sandspit 5, Smithers -1. -12 in Old Crow, Dawson -10. Wrigley -12, Fort Simpson -12 there. Sax Harbor sunny and -22, Polituck -21. Baker Lake -27, Whale Cove -16. And Arctic Bay -23, Iqaluit -4. A diverse group of citizens in Manitoba were awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medals on Tuesday for their service to the province, including a number of Indigenous youth. Among the recipients were Cambria Harris and Jordan Myron, who were leading voices in the Search the Landfill movement, not just for their mother and sister, but all MMIWG2S plus people. Métis fiddler Grace Ginter was also a recipient who in June performed at the 80th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. Janessa Dumas, a 15-year-old from Matthias Colomb Cree Nation, was also honored. She was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney disease at the age of 7 and received a kidney transplant 4 years ago. She is now the Children's Hospital of Manitoba champion.
And then Janessa, the champion child, raising money for other kids who have to go to the Children's Hospital. And to see the first event we were at, the shy young woman from Puckatawagan, to now see the bold, confident, poised public speaker that you've become over the course of your year, it's amazing. And so I'm so proud of everything that you've done.
It's that time of year where organizations open their doors to share some Christmas cheer. In Winnipeg, the Urban Transition Center welcomed the public to a turkey dinner and raffle. The center has been around since 2005 and serves over 17,000 First Nations people moving to the city each year. RTR Wheatley prepared this short report.
Everyone get a chance to have something to eat? My name is Chris Prince and I am the manager here at the Eagle Urban Transition Center. It's a time of year. Want to be able to try and give some individuals a warm meal. We probably served a little over 200 dishes today. We provide services to individuals who are, maybe looking for employment, looking for housing, need some mental health and addiction support, maybe some medical support as well. Christmas season, it's a hard time for a lot of people, right? Maybe loneliness and things like that. Some people experience things that we take for granted, such as being able to get together with family and have a nice meal. So we want to try and hopefully be able to close that gap. I think one of the important things to do is to try to be kind to each other. Let's be nicer to each other, a little more patient as well. And let's not forget to try and help the ones that need help the most. And also, when you go home at the end of the day, don't forget to hug your kids and grandkids.
And that's your evening newscast for this Wednesday, June 11th. We're back, or December 11th. Where did that word come from? We're back again for your daytime newscast tomorrow. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, Masicho, hi, miigwech, kwana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.